Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hello and welcome to the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. I'm Stephanie Dunham.
I'm Evelyn Mason.
And I'm Rochelle Knapp.
Today we're going to be talking about impulsivity in a self-defense context. What it is, how it can be a problem in stressful situations, what self-regulation is, and how we can use it to protect ourselves. So we're going to start with our first question of today. What is impulsivity? And I'm going to be honest, I have anxiety. I don't have impulsivity. I mean, I can't say I've never been impulsive because obviously I have, but I'm not that impulsive of a person. I tend to think things through. I tend to take my time. Some of that is self-taught. Some of that is just my general nature. I'm sort of laconic, and I think somebody called me sanguine once.
Sanguine, yeah.
So I don't tend to go with impulses. I might feel some occasionally. Like if somebody's saying something that's really kind of pissing me off, I might feel an urge or an impulse, but I don't particularly go with it. Do either of you struggle with impulsivity as part of your life?
Oh yes, in fact, the whole time you were talking, I had these urges to say things, and yeah, absolutely, every day, pretty much.
Okay. How about you, Rochelle?
Yeah, I definitely have a struggle with being impulsive.
Yeah. So you guys are going to be the experts in the house.
Yeah.
So I'm going to rely on you to talk about this more. I am more in tune with the self-regulation aspect of it, so I might be sort of adding my 2 cents on that part of it. But for the most part, I think I'm not going to have much to say about what impulsivity is and how it can be dangerous from the perspective of being impulsive. I might know what it looks like on the outside, but I don't know what it feels like on the inside. So let's start with our first question. What is impulsivity?
It's an overpowering urge to do something, and it usually is very strong when it first enters into your mind. I've had bodily reactions to impulses before.
Like what?
For instance, a lot of times I struggle with a sugar addiction. A lot of times I'll see something I want, and without even realizing it, I'm already moving towards it. And I quickly realize it's an impulse to grab it, and then I have to stop myself.
Okay. Is it like a physical sensation that you feel?
Yeah, it's really strong urge to grab the thing. Just all of a sudden, it's there, and it's physical. There's not really any thought behind it, at least in this case.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Evelyn?
Yeah. For me, it's like I really want to do something. I really want to say something. And I sometimes liken it to a lunging dog, because it's like I have this thought, I want to do that thing, and I feel like I'm already moving on it, or my mouth is already starting to form the words, or I'll blurt something out, or you know, it can be very overpowering, and yeah, it's just a strong urge, like a desire, a really strong desire to do something, say something, eat something, go somewhere.
Do you find that, like I think you mentioned, Rochelle, there's not a lot of thought going on?
Right.
It's just something that occurs to you and you just do it. Do you think that there is some thought behind what you're feeling, or is it just too fast for you to grasp? I mean, how do you get from the impulse to actually doing it?
I think it depends on what the impulse is. If it's something I want, like Evelyn was saying, if it's something I want to say, there's definitely a thought behind it, because I can feel the words, I can hear the words in my mind, and I can feel the urge to say it. So I can control that to some degree, because I can actually have the thought beforehand. If it's something like, I want to eat that thing over there, there is really no thought behind that. It's just a physical a reaction to seeing it and wanting it.
So, we talked about what it is, but why can it be a problem? Because obviously,
Yeah.
Impulsive behavior could have some good sides, right? A lot of times, impulsive people are creative. They have a lot of great ideas that come up. So being impulsive isn't 100% bad necessarily. But evidently, there are some problems with being impulsive. Do you guys
Oh, yeah.
have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. From my own personal experience, I've got a, shall we say, a plethora of ways that it has definitely not served me well. A lot of times it could be the right thing, but it's at the wrong time. There is something that somebody says that I immediately feel a response. And if I don't stop myself, I could be saying something that escalates a conversation into an argument, and then the argument into something heated. I've also, when I was little, I would have that urge to just get up and move around while I'm in class.
Yeah.
And I would find myself in the back of the classroom. I remember one time in particular, it's a little weird, but we had this big tub of glue in the back of the classroom, and I was curious about that glue. And so next thing I know, I'm standing in front of the thing of glue, and I'm lifting off the lid, and the teacher's like, "Evelyn, get back in your seat." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I should be doing this."
How did I end up here?
Right.
Yeah, so it's usually inappropriate.
Right.
It's
So
not necessarily a bad thing in itself. Like walking to the back of the classroom
Right.
and, being curious about the glue isn't bad, but while the teacher is trying to teach us, how
Wasn't
to
the
do
right
math
time
or
to be
something.
curious about glue.
Yeah.
If you're going to be curious about glue, you should probably do it at a time where it's not interrupting anything.
Yeah. Or whatever, whatever it happens to be.
Right. So being impulsive isn't necessarily an evil or bad thing. It's just that being impulsive can be disruptive.
Yeah, and it can lead to consequences we don't want.
Consequences? Wow, didn't we just talk about that?
You know?
Yeah.
If you're curious about consequences, feel free to go and listen to our previous podcast.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely.
There's always a thread in there that connects them.
Yeah, so, there are consequences to impulsive behavior. Sometimes the consequences are good, sometimes not so much.
Right.
Like, Evelyn trying to play with glue in the middle of class, while the curiosity of a child is a good thing, and figuring out what the glue is and how it works is a fine thing. At the moment, it wasn't the appropriate thing.
Right.
Rochelle, do you have something you wanted to add?
For myself, since I was young, I've always had this insatiable curiosity about pretty much everything, which is good in and of itself, but it created this problem of impulses to want to figure something out right away. And this age of technology and having basically a little computer in your pocket, I'm constantly wanting to look things up, and I realized that's not always appropriate. If I'm at work or if I'm doing something else and I don't have time at that point, I have to tell myself no. And I feel that little bit of like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
I can't do what I want to in that moment. That's where the inappropriateness comes in. I'm doing something else, or I'm at work, or I'm, during a class or something. That's not the time.
Right.
Right.
It can wait.
Right, right. Because impulsivity is the opposite of waiting.
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, and especially if we're in a sort of an instant gratification kind of society, which I think we are to some degree.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Like
Definitely.
we have, like you were saying, Rochelle, we have information at our fingertips.
Right.
I mean, at any moment of the day, we can look up whatever we want on the Google.
The Google.
Yes, I said,
That's
I
how we
said
know
the
it's
Google.
Steph. That's how we know it's her.
We can look up anything we want. We can call, text. We can do all sorts of things. We take videos. I mean, the impulsivity that I see out there is so prevalent. And giving in to whatever urges, there may not be a bad urge. it's not necessarily bad to want to have a treat.
Right.
The problem comes when that's all you do.
Right.
And you have zero self-control about it, so that, you're constantly, like, every day, multiple times a day, going for a treat.
Yeah.
Being someone who is, I guess I could say I've had impulsivity when it comes to food, because I have, like, episodes of binging.
Yeah.
These days I'm doing much better with it, being in therapy and all that. I'm finding that when I feel the urge, I can say, no, that's not the best thing for you right now,
Right.
and stop myself from following through on the urge. But, the idea is to take a moment and assess, like,
Right.
What is this the best thing for me?
Right. Which, yeah, we're going to be getting into that.
Right. We're going to be getting into that in a little bit.
But
So, since we're talking about this in a kind of a self-defense mode, because we're not necessarily talking about psychology here. We're talking about how we can protect ourselves.
right.
And, impulsivity is definitely like an issue with, like, mental health, depending on the reason why you're impulsive. Can be
Right.
related to some sort of neurodivergence. It could be an addiction. It could be all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily our scope.
Right.
Our scope is
That's
more
true.
of, we're in a situation and we're an impulsive person. Doing or saying the wrong thing could get you in a situation you don't want to be in.
Yeah.
So, how can impulsivity be dangerous in stressful situations?
Oh, man. Maybe, Rochelle, maybe you could talk about some of, your experiences at Wawa, because that could definitely be a thing.
Yeah, they train us to de-escalate stressful situations with customers who are angry, upset about something. And
Right. So how can your customers' impulsivity be dangerous to you?
if their anger escalates and they become violent,
Okay.
and they have made threats in the past, and that thankfully none were followed through on, but that has happened. And it was a real problem for a while. I think that's why they implemented the de-escalation training, because we were having problems on a regular basis for a while with people being angry about things. And I think in my particular store, I'm thankful for my managers, because they will back you up. They don't leave you out there in the cold, so to speak.
That's
They,
good.
they will
Yeah.
protect you if you need that. You
Right.
can call a manager and let them hand it over to them, let them handle it. However, that's not always possible. So knowing what to do in the moment, not letting yourself get pulled into the impulsivity of anger because you're innocent.
Yeah, you're talking about you're talking about self-regulation, which we're
Oh,
going to talk
sorry.
about soon.
Got too
Yes.
far ahead. Right. Jumped ahead a little bit.
Right now
I
we're just
mean-
focused on how can it be dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you basically talked about a couple different things. You talked about a revenge mindset and also verbal provocation.
Right.
Yeah. Like, what if you decided to, instead of speaking in a calm voice, instead of saying, listen, we can solve this, let's figure out how to solve this or something, you were like, well, you need to stop talking to me like that, or stop being a jerk.
Right. That
Yeah.
would make it so
You
much
know.
worse.
So that urge to, oh yeah, how dare you talk to me like this,
Right.
could end up, with, you could end up getting punched in the face. I mean,
Right.
they could
Yeah.
start throwing things. Innocent people could get involved. Somebody could pull out a firearm. I mean,
Right. That's physical provocation.
yeah.
If you're-
yeah,
Either if you're impulsive and say something you shouldn't or do something you shouldn't, that could create a situation where someone is then impulsive towards you. And now you're the one being talked to a certain way or dealing with a physical attack of some kind.
yeah,
So being impulsive in a stressful situation creates tension and puts everyone in danger, because if people are just, not wanting to hear or not wanting to experience something, they could just lose control of themselves and start yelling or attacking other
Yeah.
people, which I don't know. I watch YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I see things, people doing crazy things to one another out in public over the dumbest stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years ago hearing about I heard the end of the story first. So a woman shot someone else on the highway. I'm like, well, how did that get there?
Right.
Obviously, two people driving down the road, someone's not just going to pull out a firearm. And it was like two moms. I mean, it was crazy. Well,
Yeah.
it was road rage. It was one person cut the other person off. The other person, the person who got cut off flipped her the bird. Then she was like, bah, 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 bah. Next thing you know, she's like running her off the road. And then someone happened to have a firearm.
Wow.
And now
Yeah.
we have, somebody's dead and someone's in jail.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like there's lots of ways that impulsivity can be dangerous. And, when we're in stressful situations, we want to get out safely
Yeah.
in one piece without anybody getting hurt. A little bit of a bruised ego is one thing, but if somebody's punching you or trying to stab you or shoot you with a gun or whatever, you don't want that in your life. And I don't think the other person does either. And when everybody's calmer, they're usually more reasonable.
Yeah, so it's like the difference between following like a primal urge and being more methodical, calmer, working from a wiser standpoint, more self-controlled.
Right. Hey there, Bear Club. We'd like to thank you for joining us today on this podcast episode. If you'd like to support us, you can find us on Patreon, and you can join one of our membership tiers and get the exclusive benefits for those tiers. You can also find us on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Now back to the show. So we're talking about impulsivity. We're talking about, we defined what it is. We've talked about how it can be dangerous in stressful situations. So what is the antithesis to impulsivity?
Yeah, it's almost like we're looking for the antidote, almost an anecdote.
Right.
Yeah.
What is impulsivity's krypton?
Yes. Well, self-regulation.
Oh, self-regulation.
There's a good term.
Yeah. What is self-regulation, Rochelle?
Self-regulation is essentially not giving in to your impulse. It's stopping and thinking things through, using your reasonable mind to not let the urge take control, and to do the right thing, even though it hurts or can hurt a little bit or feel frustrating because you're not giving in to your impulse. You're better off reacting reasonably, especially in potentially dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so we're talking about self-control, basically.
Yeah. I had given an illustration before about that urge feeling like the dog lunging. So self-control to me would look like the dog has a collar and I'm holding the leash and I'm pulling that dog in. I also think about, because I'm a mom, the impulse, the urge is like an unruly toddler.
Right.
And so impulse control is like mom taking the child by the hand and saying, we're not going to do that right now. Let's, take some breaths. Let's calm down. Or go run around for 5 minutes around,
Right.
get that urge under control, essentially.
Yeah, self-control is a tough one because we want to do what we want, basically.
Yes.
And, I don't know. I feel like anymore these days there's sort of this tendency to just go with the flow, go with what feels good. And, in some things that's fine, but other things it's not so fine, especially if there's some sort of dangerous situation or stressful situation you're dealing with when it involves other people. Going with what you feel isn't necessarily the right thing to do, even if the other person's in the wrong.
Yeah.
The other person could be completely wrong about what they're saying or what they're doing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should just give in to whatever urge we want to deal with that. We should have some self-control over ourselves and respond appropriately.
Yeah. So self-regulation is basically you're going to slow things down. You're going to, literally, I'm sorry, but you're going to regulate yourself. So it is the kryptonite. It's the opposite. It's instead of letting the dog lunge and attack the person in front of them or letting the toddler run into traffic, you're saying, no, we're going to slow down. We're going to not give in.
Right. Which requires thinking through your options.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Because you do have options. Like if we were just impulsive about everything, the only option we would have is to follow our impulse.
Yeah, we're not, dysregulated animals. We're not just operating on instinct.
And that would create so much chaos in our lives because most urges, impulses are chaotic in some way.
Right. There'd be social anarchy if everybody was able to do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, to whomever they wanted.
Oh, geez, I can't even imagine.
Right.
Some of the thoughts I have, oof.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, let's just put it this way, there's a lot of self-regulation going on over here.
Yeah, I mean, I try to use self-regulation pretty regularly. Things happen, people say stuff, and I may or may not react in the moment, usually not. And I try to think through what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about, what I'm feeling, and try to come up with a solution that's fair to myself and to the other person.
Yeah.
Rather than just like, what the hell are you? I'm sorry, podcast. What the heck are you doing?
Did you
What
give
is
in
wrong
to
with
that?
you?
Did you give in to the urge to say that word?
Yeah, sorry. But thinking through your options, like what are my options right now? I can react impulsively. That's an option.
And what would happen?
Right. And thinking, I think we mentioned this in our last podcast. Do you want the consequences that come with that decision you're making? Because it's your choice. You have the free will to be impulsive. But do you want what's going to come after?
Right.
And if you don't want that, then you got to think through and choose something different.
Yeah, like what else could I do? What's
Right.
another option?
I have found those who have a great amount of self-control tend to be more respected without people realizing they're respecting them. I've noticed that a lot. They just naturally are calm. They don't really get upset about a lot of things. And people just tend to naturally respect them because they're demonstrating something that I think most people are not sure they're capable of doing or are sure they can't do it. Or at least they believe they can't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm practicing trying to not be impulsive, but I feel like I have this internal fidget and it's almost constant a lot of the time.
Relatable.
And I outwardly fidget sometimes. It's not noticeable, but I can feel it. So constantly having to think about that, not giving into that feeling, a fidgety feeling, but to remain calm.
Yeah. And thinking about when you were saying about that person that people respect, I think that sort of goal, after a fashion, being like that person, what option would lead to my being respected?
Yeah. So the final piece of what we're talking about is how do we self-regulate during stressful situations? Like, how do you slow down? How do you think through your
Right.
options? How do you take charge of yourself? I mean, one of the puns I've seen out there, so from The Matrix, the what was that character, the one that's like a prophet? It's the
Morpheus. Oh, the woman. Trinity?
No,
No.
they went
Oh,
to
sorry.
visit her. What is she
Oh,
called?
yeah.
The
I can
Oracle.
picture her.
The
The
Oracle.
Oracle.
She had a inscription on a plaque above her door or somewhere in her kitchen that basically said, "Know thyself."
Right.
So if you want to, take that to its logical punny conclusion, you change KNOW to NO.
Oh, I like that.
Know thyself.
Excuse me.
Right? You have to parent yourself sometimes and tell yourself no.
Right.
Right.
Now, it's not so easy. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's not so easy to get there. So what are some ways that we can self-regulate during a stressful situation?
I remember several years ago, a therapist told me and taught me how to breathe deeply. And she said essentially, it's not really about the breathing. That does help calm your nerves down, but it's really about giving your mind something else to focus on for a minute before you move ahead to the problem. Because giving into your urge is probably, especially if it's a stressful situation, it probably isn't a good one.
Right.
And you want to be calm so you can think through what you're doing. It took me a long time to try to attempt to try that. But I have recently, the last few years, been trying to overcome those urges because impulses become compulsions, and
Right.
that's never good.
Right. Yeah. So the mindfulness is something that people talk a lot about. So
Yes.
deliberately slowing down your breathing is a kind of mindfulness,
Right.
which
Yeah.
takes you out of the impulsive mindset that you are finding yourself in,
Yes.
I would think.
And one nice thing about the whole breathing thing is you're already breathing.
Right.
So
Thank God.
it's sort of like
That's important.
Just
So-
remember, folks,
so-
you're always breathing.
you're always breathing. This is an easy solution. One thing that I've found really helpful is to kind of do a scan of myself. So I'm kind of fortunate in that I'm in a job where we have at least two meetings a week, and they're usually, lately they've been at least an hour.
Okay.
So I am adult diagnosed ADD. So I am the queen of fidget. I'm the queen of I want to get up and move around. I'm always picking my nails. And so it's been really good to, in these moments, implement some solutions. So Rochelle had mentioned about breathing. I'll do a body scan, like, am I picking my nails? Where can I place my hands so that I can be calm, so that I'm not doing whatever? Put my feet flat on the floor, feel the floor. Focus on the person in front of me. All of these things to sort of take myself in hand, like I'm the mom and my urge is the unruly toddler. And how can I just bring myself to a place of calm?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So do you find that if you're getting stressed out that you start tensing some part of your body?
Oh, yes.
Like, where do you tend to feel it?
I feel it up in my shoulders usually.
Yeah. I if I'm getting stressed out, I tend to crunch in my right shoulder. It kind of pulls up towards my ear. So how do you, because you're talking about body scanning, right? So you have to body scan to relax the body, like deliberately relax the body.
Right.
If you find your shoulder tensing like mine tends to do, I think I might want to just make it relax.
Yeah. It's that intentionally doing the opposite. So I'm feeling the tension. Usually what I'll do is I'll kind of roll my shoulders back and stick my chest up a little bit, and then my shoulders sort of fall. And then I'll take a couple of deep breaths to help my shoulders then to, the muscles in my shoulders to
Yeah.
just let go, to be loose instead of tight.
I know from experience with martial arts training and sparring and that sort of thing that when you're facing an opponent, that the desire to tense up your body is a strong one. Because it's stressful to be faced with. It possibly could get punched somewhere in the face or be taken down to the floor or whatever. So learning to deliberately relax your body, but not tense until you're striking or whatever it is you're going to do,
Right.
requires you to think differently about the stressful situation.
Right.
We have a tendency to often say the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh,
It's
man,
not
is that ever
necessar-
true?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
definitely.
necessarily the best thing to say in the moment. So it seems to me that, thinking through, like we were talking about, thinking through your options,
Right.
right? Thinking through what's actually going on. Why am I upset? And what do I do about it? Slows things down. So what we're really talking about in all of this is just slowing everything down
Right.
to where you can think through what you want to say or how you want to respond,
Right.
right? And what you say and how you respond is based on what? Your values,
Yep. Oh, there that
Definitely.
is.
Yep.
right? And a lot
Yeah.
of our values, like we've said before, come from within ourselves, our families, our societies, our, cultures, etc.
Right.
Being hot-headed and like having verbal provocations or verbal altercations might be a societal thing.
Yeah, it's even a
Probably is,
cultural thing. I know a lot of people say, well, my family's just like that. Like, we're loud, we're
Right.
confrontational.
Right. Right. But in the heat of the moment, it may not be the best thing to just say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I was thinking about how often the urges, it comes kind of from a place of chaos or can lead to chaos. So what can I do to lead to a place of peace and calm? I'll even slow down my talking a little bit, because if I have a lot of ideas, I just want to get them out. And I want to get them out fast. And I want to say what I want to say. And everyone
Slow
else
down,
around me is
Evelyn.
kind of like going, whoa, and
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so slow down. Let me think about what I want to say. Let me think about what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the best thing to do is just don't say anything yet. Don't do anything yet.
Right. Right, because, we don't always, I think you mentioned this in the last podcast, we don't always have to attend the arguments we're invited to.
That's right. Yeah.
It's true.
We don't always have to respond to everything that's ever said to us. You have to really think, what is the point? If you're going to respond, why are you responding?
Yeah.
What is your goal? Is
Right.
it just to retaliate? Just so you can feel better? I don't
Yeah.
know if that really helps.
No. I think a practical application to this that I think a lot of us could relate to is, have you ever received a text from somebody that just hit the wrong way? You immediately had a thought of, well, I'm going to tell her this. And you find
Right.
yourself starting to angrily text something back. Those thumbs or those fingers are going really fast. Your breathing is amping up. You're feeling yourself getting angrier and angrier. And I'm speaking from experience here. I catch myself doing that, and I'll just intentionally backspace over everything I was going to say. I put my phone down, and I'll go for a walk. Or
Yeah.
I'll do something, if I can't actually go anywhere, I'll do some breathing regulation. I'll do some, scanning of the room. Let me find 5 blue things, that kind of thing.
Right, right. When we were talking about this to set up our show notes, Rochelle, you mentioned masking your feelings. Like, what is that? What do you mean by that?
Essentially, in my specific case, if I'm standing in front of a customer and they're upset about something, I can't show what I'm feeling. It's a job requirement to not show that. So I have to modulate my tone, keep it steady, not give any sort of indication that I'm upset as well, and try to remain calm and solve the problem. It's not easy to do. It's necessary, but it's not easy at all. It's really hard to do that, especially when you want to have that urge to want to yell back and tell them they're being a jerk or whatever.
Yeah, so now I'm not necessarily an advocate for always masking your feelings. I'm a person who does mask most of my feelings most of the time. And I'm trying to learn how to be more open emotionally, and although I keep getting waylaid by movies that I've seen, there's moments in these movies that I've watched that now I'm crying. And I'm like, why am I crying? It may be that the work I'm doing in therapy is working, and now I'm more open and more emotional, whatever. So I don't know that it's necessarily a good thing to always be masking your feelings, but there are times when it's appropriate. Like Rochelle's talking about, someone's yelling at you and they're upset. It may not be the time to look angry back.
Right. Maybe it's time to disengage.
Right.
Let them keep their anger. I'm not going to let it penetrate me. I'm going to stay in my calm bubble, and I'm going to respond appropriately.
Right, because if the whole point of self-regulation as a tool for self-defense is to slow things down, then not showing your cards to the other person necessarily You can still say, wow, I feel really angry right now. Or you can say, you're really upsetting me. You need to back off. There's things you can do.
Right.
But,
Yeah, that's true.
Going there with like an angry expression or even a fearful expression, that could provoke more
Yeah.
from the other person. So having the self-control to speak your feelings, but not necessarily show your feelings physically, is probably a better option in a lot of situations where you're trying to de-escalate a situation. You're trying to walk away safely from a situation.
Right.
Where you're, doing your best to not be impulsive and not just fall into a hole of, just reacting to things and then find yourself in jail or in the hospital or upset about something that happened to you or any number of consequences that can come from being impulsive.
Right.
Right.
So I guess the idea is to de-escalate yourself so you can de-escalate the situation.
I like that. De-escalating yourself to de-escalate the situation. That sounds really good.
Yeah.
I like that. That might be the title of the show.
That thought just impulsively came into my mind, but I waited.
Oh, the irony.
I waited until the appropriate time to actually speak it.
Wow. We're living the dream.
We're living it.
Literally.
Well, I'd like to thank you for joining us today as we talked about impulsivity, what it is, how it can be dangerous in stressful situations, what its antidote is, which is self-regulation, and how to self-regulate during stressful situations, how to de-escalate yourself, as Evelyn said. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to being with you once again.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.